Hi, this is Ned Siegfried from Siegfried and Jensen. As proud sponsors of BeliefCast, we hope you are inspired by Todd's weekly podcasts, which contain so many courageous stories of recovery and personal growth. Remember, it's not what happened in the past that matters, it's what happens in the future. We invite you all to work hard and be optimistic about your future. Enjoy today's podcast.
Hey everyone, this is Todd Sylvester with the Todd Inspires BeliefCast. Welcome to the You're OK Mental Fitness Studio. I would like to thank our sponsors, Ned Siegfried, Luke Peterson, and Todd Bradford with Siegfried and Jensen, Mark Richards with Wasatch Recovery, Colby and Mackenzie with Thread Wallets, Drew Peterson with First Digital, Greg Jackson with Mountain West Spine and Orthopedics, and Travis Whitaker, the owner of Living Recovery Interventions. And also, I'd like to give a shout out to Paul Cardall. The music that you hear at the beginning and the ending of these episodes is by Paul Cardall. He's an amazing person, and he's been one of my heroes for years. So thanks to all my sponsors and Paul Cardall for believing in me. I love you guys so much. Please enjoy this next episode. We are back. This is Todd Sylvester with the Todd Inspires BeliefCast. Thank you again for tuning in. I love you guys. I appreciate all your support, and you know we're making a difference in the world, and that's why I'm doing this. And it's not because of me; it's because of the amazing guests that I have come on that get vulnerable and they share their stories of triumph and trials and blood, sweat, and tears, and you name it. And it's just amazing. And today's going to be no different. Today we're joined by the owner of Desert Solace, Mark Jorgensen. Mark, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Todd.
Yeah, so glad that you're willing to be here. He's actually up here from St. George, and we're here live at Wasatch Recovery, and it's just great to have you in my office today.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place.
Oh, thank you. Well, little background on Mark. You founded Desert Solace with his wife Jerri back in 2011.
Yep.
Yeah, so you've been doing it for a minute.
Got it kind of figured out by now.
Yeah. And really why you did this, and this is awesome that you're willing to talk about this, but following your own journey of recovery from pornography addiction. You were exposed to pornography at a young age. You suffered in silence and shame for over 30 years.
30 years.
Wow. That is a long time to be kind of just, sitting in that shame by yourself, and that's a scary place to be. But I'm glad that we're here going to be talking about this. But, you opened that up so you can help other people not have to go through what you did, right? Hopefully, at least for that long.
Oh yeah,
right?
Yeah, it's an addiction that's unlike any other.
Yeah,
the shame is just so deep, and people do not want to talk about it.
Yeah,
and I just hope to create a place where they could.
No, well, that means a lot, and I'm just grateful that you're here today. So why don't we start with, tell us about where you grew up, a little bit about your childhood.
Okay. I grew up in Cache Valley, outside of Logan.
Okay.
A little town called Amalga that nobody's ever heard of.
So I've never heard of that.
That's why I narrow it down from Cache Valley to outside Logan to Amalga. It's right where the cheese factory is, if that helps at all.
I know where that is.
Yeah,
okay.
I grew out on a dairy farm out there, and so kind of a farm life, enjoyed that. And my family weren't farmers, but I worked for the neighbors and spent a lot of time. And there were... where I first got exposed to pornography was at the farm. The neighborhood kids had magazine stashes in the barn, and I don't know why that's where kids stash their stuff. But that's what they seem to do it, isn't it? Stash stuff in the barn.
Right.
But so that's where my first exposure was, and yeah, I spent my whole childhood there, and graduated from Skyview High School there, and then left.
So what was your childhood like? Were you like active in sports? Were you in drama? What were you into?
I was kind of a do everything kind of kid. I love sports. I love to play basketball. I wasn't very good at it. I've always said God should have blessed me with more talent or less interest because I
you're like, I love this sport.
I love this sport and it's so fun to play, but I'm just kind of fat and slow and and I'm not very good at it. So,
right.
But I did enjoy playing with friends and in the neighborhood and stuff like that. And we're playing out in the middle of the winter, scrape off the ice off the driveway and play basketball.
Right.
And we like to spend time at the lake. My family had a boat. We'd go water skiing in a couple of reservoirs around the valley. And and it's very sheltered, very small town life.
Yeah.
There was 300 people in the little town there.
Oh, wow.
And
Yeah.
Logan was like going to town is going to Smithfield, which was a little bit bigger town, but Logan was like going to the big city.
Yeah.
And so
That puts it in
that's literally
perspective.
that's the perspective I had as a child, and just other larger places I couldn't even fathom. So
Right.
very sheltered, very safe. I felt great parents, great family. We all got along well. My parents did a good job. So I didn't have the awful childhood that a lot of people I run into with addiction do. But
Well, addiction affects everybody, right? It doesn't matter
yes,
if you're
it does.
good upbringing, tough upbringing. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, and my exposure, I didn't put the label addiction on it for probably more than 20 years afterwards.
Okay.
I just knew it was just something that just was incredibly intriguing as a young adolescent boy, and believe it or not, adolescent boys are interested in that kind of a thing.
Right.
And so I had that first.
How old were you again when you first
I'd
exposed?
say, I'm trying to remember exactly. I'd say 12, 13.
Okay.
Somewhere in there.
So fairly young, yeah.
Yeah, fairly young. And I had been taught that wasn't appropriate and I shouldn't look at that. But that's about it.
Right.
It was basicay, don't look at that or you'll go to hell. Or
right.
Yeah, or you'll go blind or something, whatever. So but it was intriguing. I liked it. I mean, it's just so I got my hands on that as fast and as often as I could. And of course, those days, this was in the, 12, this would have been in the late 70s. So the only thing that were available was magazines, and they weren't that available really.
Those were even difficult to get back then.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I only knew of one place in the whole valley that sold them, and you had to dare ask an adult to buy one for you. And that was shameful too.
For sure. So obviously at the time you knew you probably shouldn't be looking at this, but obviously as a young boy, you're enticed by these things like most boys are.
Yeah.
Did you ever have thoughts of like, man, I need to tell someone this? Or was it always like, there's no way I can tell anyone about this?
I was in the latter category. There is absolutely no way I'm going to tell anybody about this.
Yeah.
Anybody at all. And that included parents, church leaders.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody was gonna know about this.
Yeah.
I was taking it to my grave.
Did you find yourself, as you're going through this, especially when you were younger, did you have feelings of being sad and depressed or anxious, or were there other things that kind of came from that by stuffing it down and not sharing it that you dealt with?
Great question. I think where it weighed me down was just the guilt I felt over being involved in it.
Okay.
Like I said, I had a great family. My dad was quite well known in Cache Valley. He had a series of retail stores, and he was in the state legislature, and everybody knew him. And I just felt a lot of pressure. I really looked up to my dad, and just lost him a couple of weeks ago, by the way. It's sad.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah. But I really looked up to him and admired him, and I always wanted to make him proud of me and be good enough. And of course, I had this deep secret that I was keeping from him, and I was not good enough for him because I was engaged in these shameful activities.
Yeah.
So that was hard.
Talk about, there's a lot we want to talk about here, but talk about shame just for a minute, and why that's so destructive.
Shame is, I don't know if you remember Power versus Force, the book by, I just spaced his name. What's his name?
I know the book.
Yeah,
I can't remember who it was.
Cover.
Yes.
Okay. Well, he talks. He tested different energy levels. And he attached a number to each of them, and where the lower vibrational energies were grief and sadness and fear, and the higher ones were joy and love and all that. But the very lowest on the shame ladder, or on the emotions ladder, was shame. And it is the lowest vibration emotion out there, and it is. I've heard elsewhere. I think Brene Brown would talk about shame, and she would define it and compare it and distinguish it from guilt, is by saying, guilt is I've done something wrong.
Yeah.
And shame is I am wrong.
Yeah.
And that's where I felt, because I just something's fundamentally flawed with me, that I'm involved in this and can't give it up, although I know I should. it's not serving me in my life and my relationships, and it's making me isolate and all that. So the shame factor is huge, and that's with the guys that come to us. We see that too. That's every single one is buried in that shame, and that's the number one thing we have to work on. It's not the behavior; it's just the beliefs and the shame that they're buried in.
Yeah, and that's very well said. Thank you for sharing that. Shame, I've also, same thing, I'm wrong or I'm bad. Like I'm a bad person. I didn't just do something bad. I'm actually a bad person. And that shame, and I could see, and why they say that's the lowest of low when it comes to the frequency energy
David
thing.
Hawkins.
Yes, there we go.
just blurt that out as it comes to me. Sorry.
Yeah. So as you're going through this, you're getting older, you go to junior high and high school. I mean, how did that affect anything else? I mean, because again, when we're struggling, it obviously spills over into other areas of our lives. So talk about that, if you would, and just kind of how that was affecting other areas of your life.
Yeah, sure. It was very impactful because, I grew up. I was kind of unique. I was put ahead a grade in school because probably because my first grade teacher couldn't stand me, but maybe they thought I was
get rid of this
kind of a smart
guy.
kid. Yeah, I don't know. But they moved me ahead a grade, and so I was always young for my age, and I was very aware of that. And to make matters worse, I was a very late bloomer physically.
Okay.
My voice changed as a junior in high school.
Right.
So
okay.
Yeah, and so late puberty and all that, and I was just so. Girls my age were much more mature and much more adult, and I was terrified of them.
Yeah.
I just really wasn't. I just really wasn't interested in engaging just because I was scared to death. But of course, I'm attracted to them and want to be with them.
Sure. Yeah.
And I was kind of the class clown, everybody's buddy, and I had friends with everybody. But as far as dating or having a romantic relationship, that was just, I just thought no one would ever be interested in doing that. And I remember when I was 16 years old in our culture and my culture, I was living, it's time to date.
Yeah.
And okay, well, I got to go on a date, and I want to, but I don't want to, and I should. And
yeah.
But I had this girl I kind of liked, and I screwed up the courage to ask her to go to a REO Speedwagon concert with me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the Salt
REO
Palace.
Speedwagon.
Yeah, rock on.
Yeah.
And so I figured if I got something really cool that she'd really like to do, then she'd want to go.
Yeah.
And so I called her up, and that was not a quick process, by the way. But I finally was able to call her up. Finally called her up and says, "Hey, would you like to go to the REO Speedwagon concert with me?" And she says, "Oh, you know what? I'm already going." And I didn't hear that she was already going. I heard that I suck and I don't want to date you, and I'll and no one else will ever want to date me. That's what my adolescent brain was hearing.
Yes.
In the meantime, I've picked up these fake relationships with pornography, and those women are always smiling at me.
Yeah.
And they're always smiling at me and never reject me, and so that was a much safer place to put my energy and my relationship focus, and that's what I did. And I did a little dating, and I was social. I had friends with everybody, but I was the everybody's little brother,
right?
And it was, and a lot of that came from me just feeling like, well, why would anyone want to date me when I have this shameful secret that if they knew this about me, if they only knew, then they would just think I'm disgusting and wouldn't want to have anything to do with me.
Yeah. Wow. I know. You're a religious man, man of faith, and how was that trying to navigate that? Because, I hear this a lot with a lot of my clients that I deal with who struggle with pornography, who maybe had a religious upbringing. That's part of the shame. It's like I'm letting God down, or I'm letting my higher power down, and how is that going for you? Because that's just like an added thing, I think.
That's a huge factor, and a lot of people I know leave their faith because of that. They feel like that perfectionism is just too great, and I've come to realize that was really misplaced energy on my part. I of course, I was trying to live up to the expectations of my father, and I've heard it said that the people perceive God as they perceive their earthly father.
Okay.
So I read that somewhere. I can't remember where, but maybe I just made it up. But that's what I did. I viewed God as someone who, loved me, but that was conditional. If I did everything right, and specifically in LDS culture where it's you keep the commandments, quote unquote, and that's how and we love God by keeping His commandments, and so therefore if you don't keep the commandments, then you obviously don't love Him. And there's some scriptures I had misinterpreted that really affected me in that area, but that was what I've come to know is a misperception by me. It wasn't who God was, and I've come to realize that God's love for me is not subject to what I do and what I don't do. But it was a hard place to get there. I had to. I'm kind of sound like I'm stammering a little bit because it's a touchy subject, and I don't want to throw my church under the bus. But at the same time, I went to give you an example. I did the mission thing and came home and again, remember, I wasn't going to tell anybody about this. Yeah. So for those of you know what I'm talking about, I just stopped for a few months and I'm good. Yeah. Okay. Right, yeah. All right. I'm good. I'm going to go. I don't need to tell anybody this. And so did pretty good with the mission is structured and supervised, and so I did pretty good. And so I was able to stay away, and I didn't have access obviously, and so did pretty well there. But I came home and my parents had installed one of those big satellite dishes that, if you remember those back in the 80s.
Like a big tractor wheel thing.
Yeah, it's like 12 feet wide or something. Yeah, and you can get anything. Yeah, and I mean anything. And I got home, and I literally the first day home, I just got down channel surfing and just drifted into that area, and I'm off the wagon just like that. And boy, you talk about the shame spiral after that.
Yeah, I bet.
And I just see, I knew it, and I'm stuck again. And I went to BYU. And that was an interesting experience. I remember a religion class I went to, and again, is this appropriate to share, by the way?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. No, this is your story, and that's what makes this
how relevant this
so
is.
Good. No, it's
okay.
Good.
But I went to this religion class, and the teacher was a man named Joseph Fielding McConkie. And those in the LDS culture knows those are some powerful big names. And so
all three of those.
And I thought, every word that comes out of this guy's mouth is from God. And he stood up in a class one day and says, "How many of you think God's love is unconditional?" And most of the hands in the class go up, and he says, "Well, that, my young friends, is a sectarian doctrine." And went on to say that if God's, and he'd say stuff like, "Well, how is God's love manifest to us?" By the way, by Him blessing us. Well, how do we get His blessings? Well, we keep the commandments.
Follow what He says to do.
If we do what He says, we get His blessings. And quoted a scripture that said, if you keep not my commandments, the love of the Father shall no longer be with you. You'll travel in darkness, something like that. And I've come to learn what that scripture means is that if I'm not living my life in alignment with my divine self and with who God is, then I'm the one that's drifting away. I'm the one that's separating myself. Right. And God's always there, but He interpreted it and presented to this class full of impressionable young 21-year-old kids that if you don't keep the commandments, God doesn't love you. And I, of course, fallen back into this bad habit, and I just that's it. I almost got hopeless at that point. Wow. And that's just kind of belief I held for the next 2 decades, 2+ decades. Yeah.
And again, suffering in silence. You're not sharing it with anybody. Right. So you end up did you graduate from BYU?
I did graduate from BYU, and while I was there, I got married.
Okay.
And that's kind of she was a wonderful girl, and what happened is I got in a bad car accident and had to drop out. Oh, man. One semester, and so I was taken to the hospital and then went home to recuperate, and then a couple of weeks later I went down to clean out my apartment and getting all my stuff. And I ran into a girl that was in the neighborhood, in the apartments next door, that was in the ward, and got talking to her, and I had known her and got to know her, and she was engaged to someone else, so it was safe to be friends with her because she's already taken.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, she's
not scary. Yeah, she's not scary. So I can just be friends with her. And we got to know each other. And I just talked about how bored I was out there, just sitting around convalescing and just hated it. She said, "Well, come up and see you." And she and her friend drove up to Logan from Provo the next weekend. And she told me later, she says, "I had no idea it was that far. I just, I thought it was like a half-hour drive."
Like, where are we going?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so she said, I wouldn't have come if I would have known it was that far. But she came and we got to know each other. And meantime, her engagement broke up, and we kind of dated back and forth. But we got engaged really quickly and got married really quickly. Mm-hmm. And I don't, and it's my mentality at the time, and I don't mean to disparage her at all.
Right.
But my mentality was, well, if she's willing to marry me, I better marry her, because who else will be? So
Gotcha.
I better marry, because I've pulled the wool over her eyes. So I better hurry and marry her before she finds out who I really am. And so that, that's kind of the energy I went into my marriage with. And as you can imagine, it wasn't, I was not giving my all to it. And I never told her about this. This was still a secret again. I'm not going to tell her. And I can't say that my pornography problem broke up our marriage, but it did, because she never knew about it. I actually did try to raise the topic one time and just kind of danced around it. And she says, "Well, I think I know what you're talking about, but wow, look at the time. What's for dinner? I don't want to talk about this either."
I don't want to go there.
Yeah, I don't want to go there.
Yeah.
And so just that disconnection we had, and she had her own stuff, as every person does. Yeah. And so it was easy for me to nitpick her and find her faults and say, well, everything's her fault.
Yeah.
And so that marriage broke up, and it's something that I feel bad about and regret, and things have worked out for me and her. But it's something that I and it's also another failure in life.
Right.
It's another.
It just added to
validation
that shame
that
I'm
not
good.
That I'm not good enough, because and divorce in my perfect family is, you don't do that.
Yeah.
You don't. And
so now you're. Yeah.
And
I
my
can
dad
only
was.
Imagine the weight of that.
Many years later, my dad actually admitted that he felt shame over that. That one of his sons got divorced.
Yeah, because it reflected on him.
It reflected on him.
I must be a bad parent.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
And so that's how that disintegrated.
Man. Well, thanks for sharing that. I know that's probably tough to talk about, but so what happened where you finally came out and said, okay, here's what I've been struggling with. You finally, I guess, owned your story, so to speak. Talk about that, and then
okay.
If that's all right.
No, I'd be happy to. It's kind of a funny story, because I got married again. I got married to Jerri, who's my wife now, and she was amazing and awesome. And we grew up in Cache Valley, both grew up in Cache Valley, and we knew a lot of the same people, and she knew who my parents were, and my parents knew who hers was. And she worked for me. But she was and is, she's 10 years older than me. Okay. So again, that's safe. That's just
right.
This is just a fun person I can be friends with, and she has a lot of fun, and we enjoyed hanging out together, and those feelings kind of developed, and we just, we're together all the time. We just will get married.
Right.
That wasn't like that, but no,
I know what you mean, though. Yeah.
But again, I didn't tell her about it, and so we got married, and we got along great. I mean, she's just a bundle of energy, and just very, very positive and upbeat and easy to get along with. And so we did fairly well, but there was still this disconnection, because I was in this secret habit, and I kind of tried to bring it up with her the same way I did my first wife, and she kind of got what I was talking about, and she says, okay, well, just stop it. Oh, and I says, oh, why didn't I think of that?
Yeah, boy, what a radical concept.
Why didn't I come up with that idea? geez, here's my solution all the time right in front of me. I couldn't see it. And so, but I said, okay, I'll just stop it. And then of course I didn't and couldn't.
Right.
And shame deepens and got into a lot of trouble business-wise. I had a store in St. George.
Okay.
We sold musical instruments, pianos and organs.
Oh, okay.
And it was called Keith Jorgensen's. My dad's Keith Jorgensen, and that was the chain. I don't know if that name rings a bell to you or not.
Yeah, it does. Definitely remember the name.
People are...
Yeah.
It's been getting long enough, not as many remember as used to.
That, yeah.
But I had the store in St. George, and it was floundering. And again, it was just me. We actually did okay. We did fairly well for many years. I can't complain. I had a great life, but having that shame and feeling like I had to prove myself, I lived a lot larger than I had any business living. I drove cars I had no business driving. I lived in a house I had no business buying, and just fiercely scrambling every month to make these payments and all that pressure. But I had to put up that facade to look at me. I'm fine.
I'm doing good.
I'm doing good.
Yeah.
So if I've got all of this stuff, then I must be successful. And that was a weightful, heavy place to live too. That was a painful place to live, especially when in about 2008, we took on the Las Vegas market became available.
Okay.
We were able to get the dealership for the brand we were selling, and it's a market 20 times the size of St. George.
Yeah.
And I wanted to jump on that
for sure.
And but the problem was I was very undercapitalized and very understaffed. I did not have the money or people to do that. So what ended up happening is Jerry and I just would drive back and forth between Vegas and St. George all the time, and about then the economy blew up, the big housing crisis when the housing bubble burst and all that. So the economy tanked, and we're understaffed, and as a result, both stores just kind of floundered.
Yeah. And
about that time, a guy came into my life that had all the answers. I was going to solve all my problems for me. And he came in, and I probably don't have the time to share it with you, but basically he just had unlimited resources and unlimited expertise available at his fingertips to help us not only rebuild these two stores, but expand and get bigger and go to California and all that. We were going to be an empire. Yeah. Well, the problem is everything he told me was a lie. Oh. He had all these wealthy partners that were going to help us and that he worked with, and he didn't. They did not exist. He had backstory. He was good. Had backstories for all of them. Oh boy! And he'd talk about them all the time, and he had names for them, but they were all in his mind.
It's all just made up.
So he wrote about he ended up taking over the running of the business for me because I didn't trust myself. I didn't trust myself to make good decisions, so I'm going to trust this guy, even though I barely know him.
Right.
And because he's saying the right things and is confident, and but the reason I tell that story is because out of it came a real blessing. Was another guy in town got sucked into this whole scam.
Yeah. And
his name was Jerri, and he was a really good guy, and we became friends, and we got to know each other, and he was actually serving as an LDS bishop at the time, and he had this parade of guys coming into his office all the time, like all bishops do, and
right, yeah.
And he just recognized the signs, and he pulled me aside and just looked at me. He says, "You got a pornography addiction." And I says, "No, I don't." And he says, "Yeah, you do. I've seen it too many times." No, I says, "Well, I know I don't. I've seen it. Everybody's seen it, but I don't have a problem with it."
Yeah.
He says, "Well," and so I walked away from that, obviously deep in thought.
Sure, yeah.
And I called a friend of mine who had confided in me that he was struggling a couple years earlier.
Sure, okay.
He'd come to me and say, "Yeah, I'm struggling with this," and what should have been a perfect opportunity for me to come clean and say, "Yeah, me too." Instead, I take the chicken way and just, say, "Wow, sucks to be you, doesn't it?"
Oh man.
And I didn't literally say that, but that was my attitude
Right,
about it.
yeah.
And so I called him up and I says, "Hey, Jared says I have a pornography addiction." He said, "Well, do you?" And I said, "Well, I've seen it. Everybody's seen it." Said the same things.
Yeah, same thing.
And he talked to me and said, "Well, you know what? When I was struggling, I really wanted to go to this outpatient program for couples, but my wife wouldn't go with me. But I think you and Jerri ought to go do that." And he says, "Well, I'm not going to do that. First of all, I don't have a problem.
Yeah.
Second of all, the guy that runs it is my neighbor, and I know him very well. And there's no way I'm going to come clean to him." And he badgered me, and he got me to finally say, I finally agreed to. He says, "I'm not hanging up with you until you commit to call him." And I said, "I'm not going to call him." But I finally agreed to let Jerri call him.
Oh, okay.
So if Jerri will call him, then I'll do
Yeah.
it. And I don't know why I thought she wouldn't. That was because she took her about 2 seconds to hang up on me and call the guy.
Right.
And she did. And he called and he says, "Well, you know what? We start this program about 3 times a year. And our next one is starting in about 45 minutes. We're full, but we'll pull in a table for you. So
Wow.
get down there."
You're like, okay, here we
there's
go.
there's a God shot right there, you know.
Right.
And I, so wow. And so that's where I went into that building just wishing I could just crawl in a hole or cover my face or something.
Man.
But that kind of got me on the journey. And what that program really did for us is it gave me an understanding, and more importantly, Jerri gave Jerri an understanding about what addiction was about. That this wasn't just stop it. This wasn't something you just stop.
Right.
It was, my brain was compromised and I had work to do. And so she came to understand that. So it really helped us a lot. And I'd come out of those once a week. I'd come out of them just really fired up, and I got it now, and I know what to do, and I'm over this. And of course the walls would close in and the business was failing and pressure, and I had trained my brain to just escape to the only place I knew to do.
For sure.
And so I was just still struggling from this for about another year and a half. I kept struggling and got to a pretty dark place. I just discouragement over, I'm never going to get over this. It's just I'm in a very dark place, and kind of made some mentions to my wife that scared her, and so she, well, actually she didn't approach. Back up. My brother, who was in the recovery business, who owned a treatment center for substance abuse, came to my wife and said, "What's wrong with Mark?" Or actually, he said, "What's he on? What's he taking?"
Right.
He's on
Thinking
something.
it was a substance
Yeah.
abuse
What's he on? And he goes, "Nothing." I'm like, "He's not on anything." He says, "Yes, he is. I know that look, and he's on something." And she told him, says, "Well, he's got something going on, but we're working on it." And he said, "Well, whatever it is you're doing to work on it, it's not working because he's in bad shape."
Yeah.
And so he got busy, and I was just furious, by the way, at Jerri for confiding Mike, because now
him.
an older brother knowing that's just the worst. And but he got busy and found a place that treated sex addiction and pornography addiction, and next thing I know, I'm on a plane to Mississippi for 45 days for inpatient treatment.
Wow.
And that was very valuable. It probably saved my life. They're very good. They're very professional. They know what they're doing. But there were, and while I was there, I really felt, of course, my business had collapsed, so I didn't know what I was going to do
what are you
to
gonna
make
do
a
now?
living.
Yeah.
And I just felt really drawn to the recovery field. And I says, I want to help others take this journey, and called Jerri and I said, "Hey, I think I know what I'm supposed to do for a living." It says, we're supposed to start a recovery center in St. George. And we had no business doing that. We just, we didn't know anything about that.
Yeah, you were selling pianos.
I was selling pianos. So I didn't know anything about that. And she was all in, and I said, "Well, great. Let's see. Let's find a location." So what you do in pianos, you find a location. and found a location that was a cool story too, because we were out biking, and I said that place would be perfect for a recovery center, that house right there. And it was just a house, as far as I know, it was occupied and lived in, and I didn't know where to find a location or property, so I started calling other recovery places and just asking if they had any property that they wanted that might lease to me or something.
Yeah, right.
And the first place I called says, "Yeah, we've got this place that we built as a expansion before the economy collapsed, and it's just been sitting empty for a couple of years, and I bet we'd work something." And he told me where it was, and it was that exact same house I pointed out, that exact same house.
That's amazing.
And so I got the location, and so I go down to the city and get a business license, and I'm in business.
Yeah.
No. Maybe in the
piano. More to it.
Maybe in the piano business you do that.
Right. Yeah.
There's a lot more to it.
A lot more moving parts with this.
Yes, it is. Yeah. So I spent the next year doing everything you need to do to get licensed with the state and do everything, and got a great education doing this. And another cool part about the story is Jerry and I did, in the middle of all this, building Desert Solace, and when I was in pretty good recovery, we agreed to share our story on KSL between conference sessions, those little vignettes they do.
Uh-huh.
And that's remarkable, because I went from I'm never telling anyone.
That's what I was going to say.
I'm going to tell the story on.
Talk about the extremes.
I'm going to tell it on TV and tell it on a podcast. But we did that broadcast, and it got a lot of people were very kind and very, very appreciative of me being willing to share that. But why did I share that story? Oh, I know why. Because they also, as part of that project, they did a group of women. They talked about a group of women, how does this impact you? And one of the wives that was at that meeting, Jerri. Oh, okay. Well, I got to go back and insert something. Sorry. I asked my therapist, told him what I wanted to do. He says, "That sounds like a great idea." And I says, "Well, I've blown all my money. I don't know how that's going to happen." She says, "Well, I know someone that might be might be willing to assist in that." And I says, "Okay." And so that's just the conversation he and I had. But independently, Jerri was talking to this lady at this KSL thing.
Yeah.
And they were just chatting, and they introduced themselves to each other. And she said, "I'm so-and-so," and it was that lady that my therapist had told me about. And Jerri just looked at her and says, You're supposed to fund our treatment center." And the lady just was kind of taken aback. And,
right, yeah.
and then she said, "Okay, when are we going to lunch?"
Wow.
and so
amazing.
She came out, and she agreed to put up some funds to get it started and keep it afloat while we were getting licensed and getting open. And
oh my gosh.
And that's how Desert Solace started.
Wow. And it was 2011, correct?
Yeah. Well,
Or
we didn't take. We started in 2011. Took about 7, 8, 9 months to get all the paperwork done and to get the word out.
Yep.
So when we finally had a group we could start with, then we started in January of 2012.
Wow.
So we've been open we've been having guys come for just over 10 years.
Wow. That is amazing. You know what I love about your story is that, and I hear this a lot with people, just you're going through all this trial and struggle for 30 years and among everything else in life that comes at you, and you're dealing with this. But the moment it got to where you ended up, you're starting to share and you're being more open about what's going on, not only does it start to heal you and to open up another world, but now look what you're doing. You're giving back and actually giving people the opportunity to hopefully not go that many years, or if at all, than what you've been through. And now you're helping people with this. I just think that's amazing.
Well, thanks. I hope we are, and I know we are. And
sure.
I'm always kind of envious of those young kids that come to us and are finding recovery at an early age. And
they're getting it early.
I wish I would have done that, but I did it when I did it. I can't change that, and that's fine.
Yeah.
And it's worked out perfectly. And we've grown through this. Jerri and I are as close as we've ever been, much more close than we were when we first got married, and we're doing really well. And
that's awesome.
We just love what we do. It's just really cool to see the light come on these guys that come in just so hopeless and desperate. It's really cool.
So is this an inpatient program?
Inpatient, yeah.
Okay.
We do have an outpatient program.
Okay.
It's mostly aftercare for our clients.
Okay.
Our main focus is the inpatient, but we do offer an outpatient.
Gotcha.
But that's kind of getting known now too. So we're growing there too.
Oh, that's awesome.
Just taking on, people in the community.
Yeah. I mean, to think where you are now, you probably never saw that coming. You know what I mean? Like,
no,
that moment that you were saying that you felt like your business was just closing in on you and it's not going to go anywhere to where you are now. I mean, it's amazing how just a little shift in some things and how it changes everything.
Yeah, it was. And I have no doubt that this was divinely guided. Just the two stories I shared with you.
God shots.
All the right people showed up. For example, I knew I wanted to have equine therapy as part of what we did. And Jerri was at this thing, some kind of a meeting, a Tupperware meeting or something like that. I don't know what it was, with a bunch of ladies, and she got talking to this lady, but we want to do equine therapy, but I don't have any horses and I don't know anything about it. I just know I want to do it because I've done it and I thought it was really cool. And so Jerri's talking to this gal, and she says, and when we had the place for him, we were on 5 acres and corrals were already built.
Yeah.
And this lady was talking to Jerri and says, I have got all these horses that I'm losing my place, or for some reason she was not able to keep them there anymore, and I need a place to put all these horses. And Jerri said, well, what do you do? He said, well, I'm an equine therapist. And so that's how we met her, and we had her and the horses just like that. Yeah. And the therapist we were supposed to have fell right into our laps, and there's a story there too I won't bore you with, but
that's amazing.
Actually, that is kind of a cool story because
sure.
My therapist recommended someone that might could do this, and I went and met her. Her name was Lynn Clark Brunson, and she's just an institution in St. George, and she unfortunately passed away last fall from COVID. But she was, she worked for us into her 80s. But she says, well, we're going to need another therapist to do this, and the only person I do that a lot. I'm sorry.
You're good.
My wife says I'm a terrible storyteller.
I think you're doing great.
I remember stuff and I go back. So, okay.
That's all right.
But I also knew I needed a what they call a CSAT, a certified sex addiction therapist, to come in and run the program. Well, there was only one in St. George. And I inquired about him a little bit. I found out, well, he wasn't practicing anymore. He'd left. He wasn't practicing anymore, and he'd gone. The housing market was booming in St. George, and his brothers talked him into helping him with their cabinet business.
Yeah.
So, well, okay, I'll find somebody else, and ask my therapist. And she said, well, go talk to this lady. Go talk to Lynn. And so I went and talked to Lynn, and she said, and she even said, I said, no, why would I want to do that? And she said, it just weighed on her all night. And she called me the next day and says, I'll do it. I'm supposed to do this. She said, but we need another therapist, and the only one I'll work with is this guy. And it was that same guy. And I said, but he's not practicing anymore. I said, well, yeah, he is. The housing market busted, and he went back to practicing, and he's went back to therapy, and so he came on board. So that's how we found our 2 first therapists. And
that's awesome.
And other employees kind of the same way. Just really neat stories.
Yeah. Wow. Well, it's really inspiring to see what you're doing now. Do you have plans of expanding, or do you just kind of like you've got your place and that's kind of what you're going to do, or do you feel like you want to?
We're not opposed to expanding.
Okay.
We want. I originally wanted to call it just Solace, and say, well, let's add desert in front of that, and then I'll have a different Solace if we go to.
Gotcha.
To do one in the mountains.
So you kind of leave the door open a little
Solace
bit
or something.
Yeah.
But if I do expand, I want to do it right.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about this. I kind of had this attitude of, if you build it, they'll come.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a lot more work than that.
Yeah.
I had no idea what I was getting into.
It's funny. So many people come, here and say, I want to open a treatment center, and they're all gung ho, which is great, right? But just like you said, once they get into it and go, oh, I've got to do all of that.
Got to do all of that.
And I got to get this approval in order to get that approval and it's like you said, it almost took you a full year just to get it going.
Yeah.
After you had made the commitment. So I think a lot of people don't understand. So it does say a lot about you stuck it out.
It's not addiction insurances will pay for, so it has to be a cash pay insurance. That was tricky, and there are a lot of people that are struggle with it. And there's a lot of potential clients out there.
Yeah.
But for people that have the time to get away for 90 days, and we have it be a 90-day program, just because my own experience was 45 just wasn't enough.
Yeah.
And people ask me all the time, can we do it shorter? And when we first opened, we did offer a 45-day program, gave them the option.
Right.
But we just found that people that only did the 45 days just weren't ready. They thought they were. I've got it. I get what you're saying. I get what you're teaching me, but they just had not practiced enough.
Yeah.
And didn't do as well as guys that stayed the full 90.
For sure.
And so to get people to commit to a full 90 days and that much money was
it's tough.
It's tough, and it wasn't a matter of you build it, they'll come. You got to. It's just like pianos. You got to sell them one at a time.
You got to sell them one at a time. Absolutely. Yeah. Wow. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. If there's someone, I always like to ask this question with people coming on here. If there's someone listening to your voice right now who's struggling with pornography or anything for that matter, what's some good advice that you could give them? You've already given some good stuff, but what would you tell that one person right now?
Say something. Just step through that shame and be willing to reach out to somebody.
Yeah. Find
a safe place, of whoever that might be, and look for help wherever it might be. And the initial step is, we all know the first step is admitting you have a problem, and that was a tough one for me. I kind of had to have my nose shoved in it to recognize it, but but just be willing to reach out for help. Say this is something I can handle on my own, and I need some help doing it.
Yeah.
And that initial stepping through that huge hurdle of shame is very freeing.
Yeah.
And that's where you got to start.
Oh, I love that.
And then from there, it's just depends on what, there's a lot of good programs around. I know we're kind of unique and not everyone goes to inpatient treatment, but, in fact, I went to inpatient treatment against the advice of my therapist.
Mm.
He says, you don't need that. Your addiction's not that bad. But he also said, this is on a scale of 1 to 10, your addiction's about a 2, but your shame's about a 12. And so I said, I just need to get away and just work on me.
For sure.
And so that's what I did. And
I love that.
And so, obviously we hope Desert Solace would be an option for people. If often that people come to us after they've tried other things and failed. But I if you have the time and means to do that, it's well worth it. It's well worth it. And it's not about stopping the behavior. That's what people don't. Yeah. We don't talk about sex and we don't talk about pornography. We talk about what's getting in the way of you getting what you want out of life.
Exactly.
And I
love that.
In that sense, it's just like any other addiction.
Yep. Get to the root cause, the belief that causes the behavior and that kind of stuff. I love that. If someone wants to reach out to you and learn more about your place, ask you a question, that kind of thing, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
I will, if people want to get a hold of me, I'll give you my personal cell number. You can call me directly.
I love it.
It's 435-817-1351. We do have a website, desertsolace.com. There's a number on there to call that's different, but I'll give you my direct number if you want to have that.
That's awesome.
And even if you just want to reach out and ask questions and wonder what we're about and what the program's about, I'd be happy to do that, answer questions and share.
Love that.
Yeah.
personal phone number right there. We'll put it in the show notes so
Okay.
everyone can get to it.
Okay.
For sure. Well, I can't thank you enough, Mark, for taking some time to share your story with us and being vulnerable today. It's amazing how vulnerability crushes shame.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's kind of one of the messages I took from your story. And I know it took some prodding and some people pushing and this and that, but I just think it's wonderful of what you're doing now and that you've decided you want to give back and help someone else. And that's why you've got this place. So anyone listening to this right now, I recommend give Mark a call. If you have a loved one who's struggling with it and you've tried other things, you're just not sure what to do. And even if it's maybe not the right fit, he will guide you in ways that you need to be guided. But just reach out to him and ask him the questions you need to.
Yeah. And one thing I kind of forgot to mention is that we treat pornography and sex addiction because this is an addiction that will escalate.
Yeah.
People will start acting out with others, or it will, a lot of times, we get a lot of calls from people that maybe get that knock on the door from the police because they're in the wrong part of the internet and get caught, and that's their wake up call. And that's where this addiction can escalate to serial affairs or one night stands or acting out with others, and and sometimes it takes people getting fired or getting police at their door or getting served divorce papers, or it has to be the wake up call. And I just advise people don't let it come to that. Let's
try to avoid that if you can. Because
they say in addiction you got to hit rock bottom, right? But I firmly believe you can pick where your rock bottom is.
I agree. You don't have to lose everything in order. Yeah. And really, just like you knew you needed help, you just didn't want to talk about it. And I love what you said, say something.
Yeah.
If you're struggling, say something. Just get a little bit vulnerable. What is that? 20 seconds of insane courage and tell someone about it.
Yeah.
And if anything, anyone listening to this that's struggling with that, or someone, have them call Mark, because obviously he's been through it. He's not going to judge you. As a matter of fact, he's going to champion you.
Absolutely.
by being willing to call and talk.
Yeah, and it is interesting when people do call me and I can feel that shame through the phone line. I know where you are. I know where you are, brother, and I get it. Don't.
Yeah.
Just I'm not judging you here.
For sure.
I know where you are, and I've been there, and it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, Mark, thank you for taking some time today. I'm grateful to have you live here in the studio, and it means a lot that you would be willing to do this. And I'm just grateful that our listeners get another aspect of addiction that they don't maybe hear a lot about, but it's very, obviously it's an issue out there that people are struggling with. So thank you for being here today. It's really good to sit here with you and meet with you.
It's been my pleasure. I appreciate the invitation.
You betcha. Well, there you go, folks. I told you it was going to be another great episode, and it definitely was. Mark Jorgensen, the owner of Desert Solace. Please reach out to him. I will have all his contact information in the show notes. And also, I say this every time, but it's true. If you have someone who's struggling, and specifically with this episode with pornography, share this episode, send them the link, and this might be a good way to break the ice. And it might be a good way for them to go, you know what, I finally need to say something. So this would be a good tool to just share the episode of Mark, send a link saying, hey, let me know what you think of this, and you can follow up with them. So please share it. Again, Mark, you're amazing. Keep up the good work, and anything we can do for you, just let us know.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay. Till next time, everyone.